Hi, I'm Joe Feeks, editor of Pig Health Today, and with me is Dr. Joe Connor. He is a swine veterinarian at Carthage Veterinary Service in Illinois. Great to see you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. Good to see you again.
Now, as a veterinarian, you have been caring for pigs for, I guess, more than 40 years.
That's
and
correct.
It's safe to say you've seen it all.
I'm not sure I've seen everything, but I've seen a lot of it.
But your presentation at the 2019 Leman Swine Conference, you sound like a guy who's maybe seen enough. You're saying, I've had enough already, never mind control or prevention. We've got to eliminate some of these diseases.
Well, Joe, I think the thing we want to keep in mind is that as an industry, we export somewhere above 27% of our product on an annual basis. One of the reasons we can meet those exports is that we have a low cost of production. I think we've recognized over the years that disease is one of those inputs that really changes that cost of production. And so when we think about how to manage diseases, we typically go through a process of management through the tools we have. But at some point, we ask ourselves, can we eliminate those particular agents and then remove them out of the equation as far as contributing to the cost of production? So my presentations dealt with the elimination of PEDV virus, porcine delta coronavirus, as well as TGE and Mycoplasma pneumoniae.
And do you see those as the low-hanging fruit? Because there are a lot of diseases out there you could target.
Yeah, I sure do. When we look at the databases and we remember that PEDV and then porcine delta coronavirus were introduced in 2013 and early 2014, our databases today would clearly say that the prevalence of both of those viruses have decreased considerably and are now at a point where we should consider elimination. We've intensified the tools from 2013-14 to today, primarily by improving biosecurity, and we know how to eliminate PEDV and delta coronavirus on an individual herd basis quite effectively. Mycoplasma pneumoniae is a little bit different in that that's a disease that's been within the industry for years and years, but in the last 10 years, similarly, we've recognized that it has a higher cost than we thought previously, and we've also recognized that when it is with co-infections such as PRS and swine influenza, that cost goes up dramatically. So as you think through that, you would say, well, we're having difficulty eliminating PRS, we're having some difficulty in managing influenza, so if we can remove Mycoplasma pneumoniae out of the equation, we can also lower our cost of production and improve productivity.
So how do you get started with this? Because you've rattled off several different diseases, and then of course there is PRRS and swine flu and so many others. If a producer says, yeah, Dr. Connor is right, we should be eliminating TGE, we should be eliminating Mycoplasma, how do they get started?
Yeah, so if you look back, and about a year ago I gave a presentation just summarizing all of the diseases or pathogens that we've eliminated out of our industry over the last 40 years. And that list is actually quite long. And they all start with really individual herd elimination, and then success in the individual herd and adjustments to programs that are more cost effective. Then it moves generally to an area, and then to a region, and then national as the last part of the elimination program. So it's always driven, Joe, by what tools we have available, what the risks are that that pathogen will re-enter the pig population, and then what success we've had in those elimination programs. And that's what our veterinary community has been tremendously successful in. They've been able to identify these low-hanging fruits, modified the tools that will be cost-effective, and then push forward with the producers to be successful.
But if I'm a producer, I mean, you talked about the risk of reinfection. Eliminating Mycoplasma, for example, is going to require considerable time, labor, and also investment. What sort of assurances do they have that this bug won't come back to haunt their herd?
Yeah, Mycoplasma pneumoniae is actually interesting because for years we have thought that aerosol transmission, particularly in pig dense areas, was always going to be the way that we reinfected herds. A study that Yeski and others were involved in 2+ years ago showed that actually we can have closeouts remain negative to Mycoplasma pneumoniae even in pig dense areas. So we really took that risk factor out of the equation. Now, there's always some unknowns, and if we think about Mycoplasma pneumoniae, we had some herds in 2019 that were infected that we have not found the source of the introduction of that pathogen to those populations. So producers are always going to have that question. Can you guarantee zero risk of recontamination? The answer is generally no. But what we do know is that if we've eliminated the pathogen one time, we've got the tools, and even if we can't recognize the reintroduction pathway, we can still re-eliminate that organism again and improve the health and productivity of that herd. And we'll continue to look at those introduction pathways, because anytime there are those unanswered pathways, we want to try to understand those.
What farms are the best candidates for elimination?
Well, the easiest ones are always now the segregated production farms. So breed to weed on one farm, nursery or wean to finish on the other farm. And that's going to be true and is true for these viruses and this particular respiratory pathogen, and would generally be true for all of the agents that we're concerned about, because it changes the dynamics of the cost of elimination and the steps that you can use to eliminate.
Now, biosecurity has to be a big part of any kind of elimination, or for that matter, a control program. But it's one of those topics where you bring it up to producers and may sound easy, but then that they might glaze over after a while. What have you learned about biosecurity? What can we do to make it even better?
Well, I think a good example, Joe, would be a TGE. We talked about it in terms of part of the elimination nationally. In actuality, the number of cases of TGE has gone almost to zero with the increase in biosecurity. And what PED revigorated us was that there are steps and practical steps that we need to understand to intensify biosecurity, so that we have both bioexclusion and biocontainment. So from 2014, the industry has aggressively moved in strategies that would increase the biosecurity at the individual site, and particularly in transport, where we know is a common method for us to move particularly viruses and bacteria.
So we've talked about elimination, we've touched on control, but what about prevention? We're raising pigs differently today than we did 5 or 10 years ago. We're certainly managing them differently. Are you concerned about any older diseases reemerging in the pork industry?
Well, I think that's always a possibility, and one that comes to our attention occasionally is good old swine dysentery or Brachiospira,
really?
that we see increasingly somewhat in Midwest production systems.
Now, Joe, you and I have both been in the pork industry a long time, and I think I did my first interview with you more than 30 years ago, and I think that might have been on bloody scours, or otherwise known as swine dysentery. I thought that disease went away.
Well, we probably missed the opportunity to eliminate that disease when we had the prevalence really low. Now we see, if we look at our diagnostic prevalence, that it is increasing in a few of the geographical areas. At the same time, we've lost some of our control methods, and so one of the factors as we think about elimination, and Brachiospira swine dysentery being a great example, we want to take that opportunity when prevalence is low to try to eliminate those pathogens, because maybe some of the tools that we have during that time period will not be available to us, and that's a great example, Joe.
Now, the pork industry has done a nice job of reducing the amount of feed antibiotics that they're using in feed, particularly the medically important ones. Do you think, while that's a positive trend from an antimicrobial resistance management standpoint, are we opening up the door for other bacterial pathogens?
If we go down and think through bacterial organisms such as Strep suis and Haemophilus parasuis, we have to move to other control methods, primarily involving vaccines or exposure methods, since we don't use the antimicrobials like we did previously.
Now, we've talked a lot about bacterial pathogens today, but viruses obviously get a lot of attention, particularly for the possibility of them being transmitted through feed. What are you telling your producers these days?
Yeah, one of the things that, Joe, that's come out of the 2013-14 PED introduction was that we can transfer viruses through certain feed ingredients. Continuing on today and thinking about the risk as ASF, we also know from research studies that that virus, as well as the other viruses we'd be concerned about, have survivability in certain ingredients. So what we're telling our producers is, one, continue to fund research, because the best research is being done here within the U.S. pork industry. It's the most current, it's the most practical. Secondly, we have information coming out that would tell us what we can do in the short term to try to reduce the risk of those viruses. So time and storage temperature of those ingredients at high risk, auditing of feed mills, auditing of feed transport biosecurity have all really come to the forefront and are things that we can't deal with. And then lastly in that arena has been feed mitigants that'll reduce the concentration, if not fully inactivate the virus, and so viruses of concern. So what we expect will come out over the next time period will be a number of mitigants that are cost effective, and we will also find a practical place within the chain that we would include those ingredients. So for example, that might be at the blender if it is incoming ingredients from outside the country, which would then reduce the need to add them at the final stage of feed manufacturing.